So grateful to be here and very happy to discuss these incredibly important and hard to talk about topics. He has an incredible backbone and staggering moral fiber. Howie is totally committed, completely ethical, totally admirable. No pressure if you can hear this, but honestly, Howie's a hero to me.
John, you joined us before, and it was a pretty incredible kind of testimony you gave, and you just devoted your life to advocacy for child trafficking, and even 9/11 truth. Maybe you could explain to us, in the last decade, what do you think the most challenging parts of coming alive on some of these issues have been?
Probably the hardest thing, and it continues, is just realizing that pretty much everything that I was told and taught since I was in grade school is probably not true. Good evening and welcome to the Traffic Report. And it's 12:01 on the Eastern Seaboard, all the way from the Appalachians to Boston this evening. And we've got the city of brotherly love in between, Howie. We've got a very special guest. He's the producer of An Open Secret, and his name is Matthew Valentinus. And Matthew, welcome. Howie, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I was letting Matthew go first since he's the guest. How are you, John?
Good. I'm thrilled, excited. A lot of things going on that seem to be moving in the right direction, and actually getting Matthew on the show, is just really something, because we had been tweeting out this documentary for quite a while. I mean, we've been doing this for, 3 months, 4 months, and I saw it for the first time probably a year ago. And what I wondered immediately was, why the FBI wasn't, doing some sort of task force and all the information that was put out in that documentary, and it's still there, I suppose. But just to have one of the people responsible for getting that made and getting it in front of the American public, I'm very honored and excited. And
I'm excited. So I say we just jump right in.
Fire away. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, Matthew, tell us just, you're an attorney and entertainment in the entertainment field, and just tell us about yourself, how you came to this project. That'd probably be a good place to start.
Sure. I mean, I went to NYU, which is where I met Gabe, who's the fellow producer and the sole financier of the film. I went for film school. He went for business. He went sort of the hedge fund route. I then went to law school, and then I had been working in entertainment in acquisitions, and then I sort of segued into business affairs, and I ended up in Los Angeles for about 8 years, and then eventually I segued back to Boston to open my own practice, and I primarily focus on life rights, true crime, book deals, book to film adaptations, and that's my specialty. And Gabe and I always keep in touch and talk about politics and sports. And really, what led us to even getting into this documentary was we had seen a really good boxing documentary. Gabe's a big boxing fan, and he wanted to maybe do a boxing documentary. And I said, sure, I'd help him with that. And that changed a few weeks later into Gabe saying, I've been successful. I'm fortunate. I want to give back. I think we should really focus on doing something that's going to help, people women or children who've suffered from some sort of sexual abuse or violent abuse. So that's kind of what the task Gabe gave to me. And, that's probably about 2011. So it took about 6 months or a year to really narrow down the project. And, I had always heard stories of pedophilia in Hollywood when I was living out there. I lived in West Hollywood. I lived up in the hills, lived down in Manhattan Beach. So, you would hear a lot of these rumors, primarily things like flying kids into Mexico was a big one, with some pretty big stars doing it. And I thought...
I don't mean to interrupt you. Like you're saying, like at a party or something, or just people you meet, or just when you say rumors, like how would you hear these rumors?
People would just tell you, they would say, "Hey, this guy told me that he was hit on by this guy this week," and
like the secret, they have to tell somebody.
Right. Yeah.
Got it.
So. Or people were at parties where they saw some pretty crazy things, and that's how you hear about it. Like you tell your friends back east, or you tell your parents that this guy is a deviant, or this woman has a sordid past, and nobody believes you, and then 10 years later they're like, "Oh my God, you were right."
Right.
So,
yeah.
So, anyways. We wanted to do a documentary about sexual abuse, and really the reason why we chose LA and Hollywood is for several reasons. We were thinking at first about going around the world, but that's A, very expensive, and B, there's been a lot of stories about sexual abuse. It's very common. Penn State, the Catholic Church, there's multiple stories about this. So this was more about victim empowerment than it was about sexual abuse awareness in this, because we felt people are aware of sexual abuse, but now we wanted the victims to be able to come forward. And we also knew that there would be a hurdle to actually getting people interested in seeing a documentary about sexual abuse, because we wanted to get beyond just the standard documentary crowd. And frankly, the way you got to do that is you have to get famous people or internationally known people involved. And really, Hollywood is the perfect place for that, because you have big name people, and you just have thousands of kids flocking there every year who are even more susceptible than, say, like the average kid in a small town somewhere. So Hollywood just really exaggerates the problem. So we're not focusing on Hollywood to attack Hollywood. I love Hollywood. I want the industry to thrive and continue, and I think it's a great American business. I think no country does entertainment as great as America does, as great as Hollywood does. But right now, it's plagued by a lot of horrible personalities and people that need to get out of the industry, and Hollywood needs to police itself. So we really thought that once we started raising awareness on this, and people started talking, we would get a lot more support, and people would support us with this. And you're starting to see that now with Harvey Weinstein, but when we first came out with this story, people just wanted to keep it down. But so the reason we chose Hollywood is, A, we could pretty much shoot most of it there and keep the budget reasonable. B, not that we want to make money on this, but we wanted it to at least make our money back or be profitable, because we're donating any profits to a foundation to help victims of sexual abuse. And you want the film to succeed. So you want, I don't know if entertainment is the proper word, but you want it to be a film that people can see. And people
Sure.
would rather see a film about child stars who've been abused by like powerful producers than some gym coach in the middle of Tennessee. So that's how we came upon particularly Los Angeles.
And Matt didn't, and in you relating that story, because we've been, I mean, we run up against this all the time, and it's kind of been burned off of us, and I'm sure you too, going through this whole process. But when I started doing this, I also thought that you think, yeah, people might be a little bit skittish and getting involved, but I mean, I had no idea how the dissonance that's involved, where nobody wants to look at this topic at all. They sure don't want to help you with it, and they don't. That must have been. Was that shocking to you when you started to find out exactly how you were the level of cooperation you were going to get out of an industry that you guys were working in?
It really was. I mean, there were instances where we're talking to like post-production houses. I mean, we paid a lot of money for this documentary, and in some situations, I'm sure we had to overpay. And a lot of times, people, they would say confidentially, "We love what you do. We want to help you, but we can't because, if we help you edit this or if we do graphics for you guys, we're also doing the next big blockbuster with the studio, and we don't want them to get pissed at us." So even if we offered to pay twice their rates, they still were afraid to do it, right? And a lot of times what happens, all the time that's happened, I had somebody at a very famous, she runs a pretty famous academic film festival here in the mid-Atlantic, let's say. And we also went to film school together, and she called me up one day and she's like, "Hey Matt, we want to have a lot of dignitaries here. We want to do a big special event for this. It's going to be great. Do you want to do it?" And I told her, I said, "Look, I do, and I hope it happens, but you're going to call me back in 3 weeks and tell me you can't do it." And and she's like, no, it's absolutely going to happen. And she's like the number 2 at this big organization. And then, of course, she had to call me up and apologize. It was getting killed everywhere. And I won't mention names, but we were getting requests from really high-level people who wanted to see like a DVD of the film. Like, we would send over a messenger, they would sit there and wait, and then they would give them back the DVD after they watched it, right? Just
wow.
And because and this is like a small project that easily could have ended up at like a Showtime or an HBO, and normally the people that make those decisions, the presidents of those companies, they don't have like the chairman of the company that owns that company calling them up about a little $1 million transaction. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of times we thought we had deals and this was ready to go, and then 30, 60, 90 days later, it's not happening anymore. And you're just like, because it got bumped up to such a high level that somebody nixed it. And it was very bizarre because the pedigree of this film was really good. The production quality is excellent. We had top lawyers working with us to clear everything. Obviously, Amy Berg is an Oscar-nominated veteran director who, one of the reasons we chose her is that she did Deliver Us from Evil on the really on the Catholic priest scandal and breaking that open, and she really knows how to get pedophiles to talk. So we felt like we had a credible director, we had really good budget, we had excellent legal, we have extra insurance on this, we have extra clearance and opinion letters. I mean, the guy who worked with us going over everything, he's the guy that clears things for South Park, right? So you get, he knows what he's right. So everything in there is verified and cleared, everything, because we knew that if there was the slightest little problem, people would come after us. And the reason why they haven't come after us is because they can't. Yeah. There's a lot more we could have put in there, but we didn't even want to leave the door open for someone to make some sort of claim.
Right. But there's obviously plenty in there, and hopefully everyone listening has seen it. And if you haven't seen it, you absolutely must. But I was just, as you were saying that, we must have been on the same page, because obviously, the goal of, a lot of, entertainment first and foremost is to make money. Apparently, I'm not an expert, but apparently they really love to make money. And it's such a compelling documentary. It's so well done that it would have made money. Like anybody that wanted to, put this on the air would have made a lot of money doing so.
Yeah.
And
documentaries. Gabe's a hedge fund guy. We came up with a pretty good financial model for this. We even set it up so people that, the crew and the directors and everybody would have been monetized. Even we were ready to pay people bonuses just for losing money, right? Like we planned to lose a couple $100,000 and still everyone would be well compensated. So we didn't go into this thinking we're going to make a lot of bank. We just wanted it to be credible and get critical attention, and it did get critical attention. What it didn't get was support from the industry. And actually it got a lot of pushback from, some reporters at different trades have agendas. Some newspapers don't do anything at all. I don't even know if there's anything on the West Coast that really covers this issue. It's ridiculous. I mean, I've had screenings here in Boston with the Spotlight team, and right now they're, doing a similar investigation of prep schools in New England and sexual abuse there. And I was like, hey, can you guys take this over? I'm like, nobody is really covering this in LA. But the problem is that all the newspapers have been gutted too. Like, they don't have the money to really staff investigations. It's not that the reporters don't try and get the information out there. They're getting shut down at the editor level. They're more afraid about liability and being sued than they are, there's no one really backing them. There's no press out there that really backs people to the hilt. And a lot of the press is owned by the same organizations who would stand to lose. Right.
What are we talking about? 5 or 6 companies that own, basically all the newspapers and the and the television,
Yeah, I mean, look, we went to CNN early on with this, and we're like, we have a whole bunch of files to hand over. Yeah, because they have a documentary division, or they did, called, and this was like around the time of Blackfish, right? So, and really we figured getting it broadcast would be the best way for more people to see it. And, our sales pitch to CNN was like, hey, you can broadcast it a couple of times, plus you can give to your news reporters all this other information we have that really needs to be verified and fact-checked, and you'll find, if you look, you're going to find a lot of other people. And they said no. We also pitched it to Bill O'Reilly's people. And Bill O'Reilly's response was, or his people's response was, Americans don't really care about this sexual abuse issue.
Wow. And, I think they're finding out that they might have been wrong there.
Well, and I think we can also see why Bill O'Reilly might not have wanted to talk about sexual abuse issues.
There is that. Yeah.
I don't want to change the subject too much because you mentioned the Spotlight team doing the story on elite prep schools in New England, and it's a wonderful article. I just tweeted it out at Traffic Report. Just as a side note. So
great movie too. Great movie. I saw it.
Yeah, a friend of mine from film school was very involved in that. I want to give him some props. His name's Michael Biederman. He was a big producer on that project, and I was very proud of him. And they did a great job. Obviously, living here in Boston, I know a lot of people that were affected by, I'm sort of a lapsed Catholic, so even the church that I was baptized in has been turned into condos. I think Bernard Law should be back here in chains and sitting in Walpole right now. And I also went to prep schools, so I always heard the stories about different prep schools with these problems. So, it's prevalent everywhere. But we figured approaching it from a Hollywood standpoint would really be what gets the national interest, and I think that's turning out to be the case with Harvey Weinstein. Finally.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you just about that personally, Matt. I mean, because I'll tell you how, just my take on it when it broke, and I've been researching this and involved in this for many years. But the I kind of missed that. It was just like, wow, this is just okay. They're gonna spin this as sexual harassment, to adult women, and it'll probably, just be covered up just like many others, and just kind of die its death. But obviously, that ain't happening. But I was just real curious as to how when you heard about Weinstein, and as you've seen this evolve, what was that like, knowing where you guys had come from?
Well, I'll give you two stories about that. I had, when I graduated college, this was like mid-90s, Miramax was like the place to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had a great interview there, and looked like I was going to get the job offer. And then the HR person told me to talk to the girl who I was going to replace. I was going to basically be an assistant. I don't know if I was going to be Harvey's assistant, but I was going to be Harvey or some upper-level execs. I would have been in that assistant group, right? And so I sat down with this girl, and and she was a smart, intelligent girl. She'd been there for about a year, and I was kind of suspect about why she was giving up this job. She had a plum job. That's the job you want, You want to work for a guy like Harvey Weinstein or Scott Rudin or a producer like that, because you do your time there and then you kind of work your way up. So as soon as the HR person left, the girl leans into me and she said, run and don't come back. You do not want to work here. And this wasn't like this is a bad place, and I was young at the time. I didn't really pick up, but I mean, it left an impression on me because I really wanted to work there. But the way she said this, it was like shocking. And thankfully, I don't think as a male, I don't think I would have been sexually molested by Harvey Weinstein, but I'm kind of glad I didn't work there, because I feel bad for a lot of the people that did, because I think a lot of them are stained by this, being associated with somebody like that and tolerating it. And that's really the goal, that we want to get this out of the industry. There's too many people who are using their positions. It should be a privilege to work in the industry. In a lot of ways, it's not a real job. It should be because you love it, and hopefully, talent should win out. But now, when you're seeing all these guys like Weinstein controlling the industry with just boorish behavior, we gotta cut it out of the industry. So that's my little rant on that. But that's how I avoided Miramax. But what was your question again? Because there was a second part of it.
No, just seeing this all unfold, and it's still unfolding.
Oh, with the Weinstein thing, right?
Yeah, what was that like, knowing that you had this story? I mean, you had it.
Yeah, and let's put it this way: we still do have it. This is the beginning of it. We know that there's a lot more information to come out. We highly, strongly suspect that there are some major settlements that, if they ever came out, would just, be bigger than the Harvey scandal. So when I heard the Harvey news, and that's why Gabe and I have sort of been sitting on this project, because we just didn't want to throw it up on Netflix and that be that. We knew someone was going to come forward. We just didn't know if it was going to be in 6 months or 6 weeks, or it ended up being about 2 years. But we knew this moment would happen. And I was up in Vermont at the ITV festival, and as soon as it happened, I just called up Gabe, and I'm like, look, Gabe, let's just throw this up for free, and just ride this wave, because everyone's starting to talk, and this is a good time for us to get this out there in support. Really, once people started talking about Weinstein, we were like, we have to bring this forward, because it's all related. It's all related.
Absolutely.
And that's why we decided to publish it for free.
And for our listeners, and we have replay listeners and et cetera, we had been tweeting out that the link on Vimeo.
Yeah, and for all the people that we're constantly having there's pirated versions out there, but they're just low quality, or the sound is off. So we're never going to stop it, but if people could just really just use the Vimeo, it would just be cooler, make our lives a lot easier. And the Vimeo version is much better quality, much better sound. So that's all I ask. So, we don't have a team of people doing takedown orders for the next 2 weeks, two months.
And I would just one thing. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting somebody there, but probably Howie. But where can they buy this? It's on Amazon? Probably?
Well, that's no, it's not. See, that's the next step we want to take. Like we've gotten literally a couple million views, and we really want, Gabe and I have full-time jobs. Like this is we've been handling this with a little help from a couple, a PR guy that's helping us out, and that's about it. So we want to pass this off to a Netflix or an Amazon. And really, I think it's a socially responsible company should step up and buy this and get it up there. Like, we're just not going to give it away for no money to somebody. We spent a lot of money on this, and really we'd like to recoup our money, and we'd like any profits we make to go to the charity. But we'd like the industry to step up and buy it. Preferably, a Netflix or an Amazon or maybe an HBO, someone where it's going to get seen a lot. Like, that's the thing, because one screen, one broadcast can get 30 million or 20 million people to watch it, or if they run it a couple times over a month, we want to get this out there as many people as possible, but we just don't. Sure, we can sell DVDs, and if we have to, what we're going to do is just sell it on Vimeo. But people don't like to pay for stuff, and people they're going to look at the pirated versions. But if we put it up for $3.99, I just really, Gabe doesn't care, but I want to get Gabe's money back. I mean, none of this happens without Gabe putting up the.
I want to see you guys do a sequel.
Well, put it this way, we Gabe doesn't even want to talk about it because this has been so stressful, but we certainly have a feature film possibility here, right? Just because the behind the scenes on this has been nuts, and I think it would make a highly entertaining film, just showing how trying to get this issue out there has been a battle at every level, and it's ridiculous.
My question was, how many people? I guess it's impossible to gauge exactly, but approximately how many people have seen it?
There's been a couple sites that have gone over 1 million. We've had them taken down, but I'm guessing between 3.5 and 5 million people have seen it.
Okay. And when you started,
that's including pirated versions,
Sure, but I'm saying when you were making it, how many people did you hope to would see it someday?
Our plan was
number?
Like that many or more. Like our plan was, we wanted it to be, have some success at a festival, and then we wanted it to do like a 20-city limited release. We were all geared up to do an Academy Award run and really push that. Like, money was no object. I mean, Gabe was like a filmmaker's dream when it comes to finance. You're not going to get that many opportunities in life. So we wanted to do a limited release, and then we wanted it to go to like a Showtime or an HBO and live there, or a Netflix. And that was it. Our goal was, let's get some critical acclaim. Let's maybe win some awards, but really let's have the foundation live. We wanted it to then segue into the foundation, where that could sort of be a place where people who needed help could go, and people could also learn about grooming and how the industry works and what they need to look out for, and also we could support some of the programs that are out there to educate parents and kids who are trying to get into the industry, and maybe to also affect change with some of the laws and the licensing and the regulations.
There you go. And what I wanted to ask you, Matt, what is the current status of that foundation? Because I had a web address, but I'm not sure if I
we just talked to our website guys. Someone's squatting on our website, right now. So
That's nice.
That's just another guy I'm gonna have to call up and ask him what kind of soul he has. And the legal stuff, when you're setting up a charitable foundation, it can be a real hassle. Like, I think with legal bills and the money that you got to put into it, I mean, I think, you're spending $50,000 to $75,000 just to be able to be in a position to accept money, right? So we've done that. I think really our focus is going to be on getting that back up and running. The legal stuff's all done for it, and it's been initially funded. But I think we want to get the film sold or at least released, out there, and then we can focus on, okay, where are the funds? The funds are going to funnel into that. But on a side note, we're also trying to work with one of the families on like a GoFundMe page, because there's one person in the film that we would really like to get some help and have the public, help them out. But we don't until we actually have I'd rather have the family talk about it than me. It's not really my place.
Right.
But we're going to be assisting with that as well.
Okay. Well, as soon as that's settled, we'll get that out there. And what I was going to say before is, I think there's a lot of people, myself included, not only for the convenience of having a DVD and making all my friends watch. It's like, here.
Well, yeah, we're definitely thinking. I mean, the DVDs are educational, and a lot of people have approached us about doing educational DVDs. And I know, we're even thinking we'll definitely the DVDs will be separate, but really, we want a big company to come and buy this and handle everything else.
Well, we had a few shows on The Keepers on Netflix. I mean, I don't see why they did an excellent job with that. That's really producing some good results, and Facebook pages and survivors coming forward, and I don't know what would stop them from this, because I mean, right now they will
I'll tell you what was stopping them. I'll tell you what was stopping them before. People making phone. There were two things that were stopping them. One, they were worried that they were going to get sued for it, and two, they were probably getting phone calls from a couple people. I know that happened at least two places. So, that's why we'll get it out there our own way if we have to. And I think much like, I don't know if you know the comedian Louis C.K., but he sort of pioneered the way of getting your own material out there and everyone just paying $5 and just being like, look, just be cool and don't pirate this. Hopefully this is a film where, it's not a Star Wars. So maybe everyone can be like, all right, we'll throw in $5. So, the film gets its money back and you have something to donate to the charity, the foundation,
Yeah, and I think you're going to have a very good response that way, and that's the way I think about it. All the crap that people spend money on, and we actually have a few of our survivors. One of them is in the process. I mean, these people are just. It's hard for me to describe how incredible that just the ones, and we've only been in contact with 5 or 6. And just how wonderful they are and capable and just angelic. I can't describe some of the interactions, and talented, and I mean, I run out of adjectives. But one of them,
and that's sort of been our driving force behind this, is our obligation to the survivors in this film, because this takes a long process. I mean, there was a couple different breaks where things were, people were finally ready to talk, or we finally got, like for instance, in the movie, there's a scene where we get, one of the victims calls up his abuser, and the abuser basically admits trying to touch him on the phone, right? Yep. And that was,
Hara,
Mr. Hara, and that was like 6 months. We waited 6 months for that. I mean, that's the tough thing about documentaries. You can't force it. It just, you got to kind of wait for things to happen when they happen. And, a lot of credit goes to the team at Disarming. Caitlin Howes was the producer I was working with a lot. I think she was the one that really told Joey to make that phone call, just to see if Michael would pick up, and he did. And in a lot of ways, once you get that, it was fate. And then when Amy went and did the interview with Michael Hara, we could not believe what fell out of his mouth. Like that was.
I was wondering who did that interview. Who was? Yeah, I was like,
Amy was doing the questioning on that, and it was at SAG headquarters, in the Screen Actors Guild headquarters, and they had a PR minder there. And this guy is just, if you watch the movie, he's basically admitting that this is a common thing. And the thing is,
it's not as bad. It's not as bad as it's only as bad as you make it in your mind. I mean, oh my God.
And he says, you just kind of fall into it, and it's and he was on what's called the Young Performers Committee, starting in 1975. He was the guy that sort of. It's not like an official job at SAG, but it's like it's a committee that they have meetings, they meet it, and they talk about what things should be doing. And he basically founded it and ran it or was very active in it for 30 years. And then after he did that, that interview took place on March 26, 2014. So after he did that, I think, we finally released the version of the film at Doc NYC in November of 2014. And once SAG got wind that the film was going to be released at Doc NYC, then SAG starts sending us threatening letters, telling us that we have to cut out everything with Michael Hara, and it's like no we don't.
No.
And I think this was really one of the first situations that a creative union, was actively trying to censor a film cut. That was unprecedented. And if you go on our YouTube channel, we've got about 22 clips there. And one of them is, we worked closely with David Robb, who's a writer at Deadline Hollywood. We gave him all this information. And he basically did a really in-depth report on how SAG lied and how SAG tried to intimidate us and how SAG tried to get us to cut the film. So instead of actually notifying all their members and saying, hey, we have a problem with pedophiles, let's clean it up, they went after us.
Yeah. Well, I actually tweeted at them today, and I'll be tweeting at them quite a bit, because that's what we do. We know you don't, Matt, but that's what they keep me and Howie around for. But just seeing that, and I was a union guy. I mean, fire department, 30 years, But I tell you what, the unions are not what they used to be, and that is really, really concerning.
Well, and I don't think even the majority of the people in the union knew that, right? I think SAG's a good union. I've got a lot of friends who are actors. I even have people that are active in SAG, running SAG. But this was at the real top levels of SAG, and it was kept quiet from everybody. And I think when the board found out, they were really upset, because I think the board might have been misled by the president about exactly what they were trying to do with us. And there's a couple articles in the Hollywood Reporter and in Deadline that you can find if you Google it, and it's astounding. It was really disappointing to see a major organization that should have been supporting us, should have been sponsoring a screening for this film, actually trying to get us to censor it.
Oh yeah, and I mean, listening
to why.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Howie.
No, I was just going to say, I wonder why. I just kind of wanted to get into the process of the movie. If you've heard, a lot of rumors in your time in Hollywood, did you have a list of people that you kind of wanted to target to try and get interviews and try and get their story? How does the process work?
Yes, we did. There was somebody involved who does a lot of kids shows that we wanted to kind of investigate more, but we kept running into dead ends. We dealt with, we approached Homeland Security, we approached the Department of Justice. A lot of what they were looking for at the time was international connections. I don't know if that's just like a process that they have to follow, but they're like, look, guys, if you could show us that this is crossing international territories, we can really help you out. And then when you go to the local district attorney level, a lot of the cases ended up just dying out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, and I'm not trying to blame. It's not the district attorney's fault. It's at least not entirely. It's the way that these laws are structured, and now thankfully I think they've changed it with the statute of limitations. But there's also, it takes so long for a victim to really deal with what happened to them, and they often don't come forward until 10 or 20 years later. And the only way we have 2 taped admissions in the film, but guess what? Those admissions could never be used in a court of law, and you even saw it with the Harvey Weinstein thing. I mean, the police did a sting investigation with that girl, with Harvey, and they still didn't prosecute the guy.
Exactly.
Right? So they make it really hard for the victims to act. It becomes a he said, she said. And then the next level they go is they just come after you with much more expensive attorneys. And look, I'm not trying to put down defense attorneys. I know a lot of really good criminal defense attorneys, and I think they're the first line against the government. That's a really tough job, and as a lawyer myself, I understand it. But I also think there's a certain group of attorneys who are just taking on people, and they act as bullies, and they're representing people that they just know are sick individuals doing sick things, and it's a shame.
One theme. Go ahead, John.
There's a whole lot of reform that's going to have to take place, and that that's where we in doing this show. I mean, we've gone into every area, and it's just what we found, Matt, and I'm sure you guys saw that and know it, that it's just like a big circle. The corruption on all the different levels affects the legal system. It affects everything, and that's why I think for a lot of the time that these cases are so hard to prosecute, and that's going to have to, a whole lot of things are going to have to change, and I'm hoping the survivors and they're going to lead the way in getting that done.
Well, right, and I was very enthused when I saw. I think his name's Mark Fuhr, the LA's district attorney, finally say, come forward. Because I've had 2 or 3 people reach out to me just in the last 48 hours with stuff, and I'm trying to get them to talk to the DA's office. Because before, maybe the DA's office wasn't as welcoming, or they would kind of just tell you, like, look, if we don't have the evidence, there's nothing we can do, even if we believe you. So really, that's what we got to do. We got to get people to learn to come forward right away and create an environment where they're not going to be victim shamed, or they're not going to lose their job or be ostracized for it. And you got to ask yourself, what the hell are all these HR departments doing in all these companies? Like just before I came on the show, we posted a Twitter, and on there's a couple of different convicted sex offenders who have worked on multiple shows by like Disney and Nickelodeon after their convictions.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Let me talk to you about that, because that was one of the, and of course we're not going to have time to, maybe we can have you back sometime, but that was one of the areas that was particularly galling to me, was seeing, well, number one, Marty Weiss, seeing that brave, young man, come forward, go through the legal process, and seeing that guy walk, and basically do 6 months in jail. Yeah, he's on the sex offender registry, and that's a good thing. But then hearing that he's an agent, he's still working with kids, hearing that, and a lot of these people, and what I got from the film was, there was a law passed, and that SAG is, yeah, and good old Michael Harrow. Oh, I haven't signed up for that yet, but it seemed like SAG had instituted some sort of background process. Is that?
Yeah, and that's a California state is supposed to be enforcing and regulating that. Like now, if you're going to be a talent agent for children, you got to get fingerprinted and sort of go into their directory. But they, so that's fairly new. But they've been really lax at that. And where you're still seeing problems is with on-set teachers. Generally they're supposed to have a card and a license, but there's been different problems with these teachers molesting kids, even guys who've been previously arrested are getting set teacher jobs. And then also there's things like dialogue coaches, right? So they might not be allowed to be on near children as like an actor, but if they're a dialogue coach, somehow I guess they're allowed to be there. Yeah. Right? Like if you just look up a guy named Brian Peck, right?
Yes, Mr. Pickle. Yeah. That dude.
Yeah.
And I mean, the fact
here's one thing I really want people to go and check out. If you go and check out our Vimeo link to the movie, if you watch just 3 minutes is all I'm asking you to watch. If you watch from like 48 minutes to about 50 minutes, there's a scene there where Bryan Singer and Brian Peck are doing the DVD commentary for X-Men. Okay? And in that scene, you have one of the X-Men or whatever they are walking up the beach, and it opens on a little kid, and then you have Brian talking with Brian Peck about the scene, and Brian Peck plays like a hot dog guy, and then there's another guy in the background named Gary Goddard who's been accused, who's had some suits brought against him, and I'm not saying he's guilty, I'm just saying he's had some suspicions brought against him. He's in that shot with Brian Peck, and this is probably one of the biggest franchises at Fox Studios.
Yeah.
I mean, could you imagine Ford Motor Company allowing this?
Yeah, and we're not talking about.
We call it laughing in our faces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean it seems to be a common theme through.
And look, at that time, Brian Peck hadn't been convicted yet, so I'm not saying Bryan Singer did anything illegal. I'm not saying Bryan Singer even knew that Brian Peck was a pedophile.
Right. But
maybe he did. I don't know if anyone's actually asked him, because he hung out with two guys who ended up being convicted pedophiles. And guess what? Brian Peck he was on a Disney show after his conviction, I believe. I think he played there. There's a guy named Sean Redman or whatever. If you look in our Twitter feed, I'm not saying his name right, but Sean something. He did a great 10-minute little video on showing Brian Peck and Victor Salva and what films they worked on after their convictions.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you what, Matt, and they better get ready, because I don't think this is not going away. I mean, just in our little world here, and we're not some big show or anything, but the people that have got involved and that are angry and that are going to be watching over their shoulder, I just don't think we can even estimate it yet, because I don't think it's properly unfolded. But
I hope you're right, because my faith has really been shattered in this whole experience, in how little. I gotta be honest with you, I don't think people care. I just don't. I think people are so distracted. We all have our own problems. We're all trying just to get by, and there's so many distractions today that I don't know if anyone really cares to the point of actually making any change. But hopefully we're seeing that.
More people care than you realize. And, like, I personally live this every day, and more people, it's an awakening process. Nobody wants to talk, I think one way that pedophiles get away with this is because nobody wants to talk about it. It's too difficult of a topic. So, it's not something, you throw it out there and everyone's just going to like gravitate towards it. you have to spoon feed it, and you have to stay with it, and you have to grind at it, and eventually, you just keep putting out more and more and more and more to the point where people will, and it's not going to be everybody, but we just need enough for we can get, and it's, my thing is like, we got to get people in the streets to say enough is enough, because we don't get the help from the media.
And on that note, on that note, just real quickly, and one of the best ideas, one of Becky, one of our survivors that have been on the show, they are organizing a rally in Washington D.C. on the 28th of April of 2018 for survivors, and that's what we're talking about. And from
I think rallies are great, but really we need law changes. And really what's going to have to change is we're going to start seeing a lot of victims bring suits against the networks and the studios. That's the only way real change is going to happen. Like, let's say there was 5 kids on a program on Nickelodeon who were all molested. They get together and they sue Nickelodeon for a boatload of cash. That's real. That's what's going to happen. Yeah. And that's kind of what has to happen.
And I hope, I agree with you there, but I think also it's going to take people in wherever, whether it's Washington D.C. or your local town. That's what we encourage, is that advocacy on a local level to get out there.
I agree. It's getting people to talk about it. It's removing the shame stigma is what it is.
And also supporting the survivors when they do come forward, because we've seen time and time again people reporting this, and it just goes absolutely nowhere. So other people would say, well, what's the point? If I report this, it's not going to do anything. And obviously one of the themes, and you touched on it earlier, was that people are afraid of never working again. This is their livelihood. This is what they always wanted to do. And if they come forward, basically it seemed like their careers are shot. So they have to have the support that if they do this, that they will be believed. The investigators will do their jobs. The prosecutors will do their jobs, and that they will continue to have their careers. And
really, what I think we need to see in Hollywood is we need to see not just, I was very happy to see Amazon fire somebody pretty quickly, and maybe the newer Netflixes and the Amazons and the Googles of the world will maybe step up and be a little more smart about how they deal with this issue. But there needs to be a house cleaning in Hollywood, because the leadership, there's really probably between 50 and 200 people who can actually get stuff done. Everybody else really just works for them, Right. And a lot of those people have been in the industry for decades, and I think they got to go. I think they got to retire and move on. We need new blood. And I think the Oscars is done. I mean, that might sound radical, but I mean, the Oscars, between the racism issues and now this, and who they've given Oscars to, I mean, it's over. I think it's run its course. I mean, who can celebrate the Oscars anymore?
How on earth, and I agree with you. I mean, and wasn't it during that broadcast that they, were pleading for the rights of Roman Polanski?
Exactly.
Oh my God! Drugs and rapes, a 13-year-old. And
dude, and these people, because they stand in front of a camera, they think they're better than everybody else, and it's ridiculous. And now we're actually seeing how pathetic so many of them are.
I mean, they've outed themselves. My biggest concern is, and watching the Harvey Weinstein thing, they've tried to encapsulate it and control the narrative to the point that it's the women, and it's right. Save the women, where it's our job.
We don't want it to be segmented, right?
Right.
And
it's like
it opens
the door, right? And then you got to take that next you got to take that next step. Like, well, if they're doing it to women, how old are these women? And Reese Witherspoon has come out. I mean, that's a big, it's a big name. And when she was 16 years old. So the more
American
the big
Ferrera
names,
happened to her when I believe she was 9.
So the analogy I would make is when, I grew up in the 80s and, AIDS was always out there, but Rock Hudson was the first one. But when Magic Johnson said that he was HIV positive, then everybody took notice.
Oh, hey, look, I'm a Celtics fan, and I was watching that, and there was like a tear in my eye. So
right.
That was like 90 or 90. I remember where I was when that happened.
Yeah. And I'm not hoping this has happened to anybody, but unfortunately, sometimes you need a Magic Johnson to happen to for people to take notice.
Well, and we've been waiting, and what I can tell you is, I think there's at least one or two. We strongly suspect, I'd say with like 80% certainty, that there's at least one or two levels of people like in that Magic Johnson way that if they came forward right now, it would change everything. But here's the thing: they're making you're asking them to give up, tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. Right. So just from how good their lives are.
Some things are, and I think we're finding this out. And this, what's encouraging is people like yourself and Gabe coming forward, after doing well and putting that back into the community. And that spirit has not died. I mean, it's still out there. And it's
died in Hollywood.
Well,
we haven't had all the higher ups that have actually made any contact with us have only been to see the film. No one's really stepped up to help. I've worked with a couple great lawyers, but no leaders have reached out to us, which is really disappointing.
Yeah. Oh, and I would totally agree with you there. But who I'm talking about is survivors of this, and I think there are people, and I think it's probably more like 99%, and it's probably more than 5, I would imagine, with just the culture, that's been going on for so many years. And should they come forward, that's who I put. And again, we're back to talking about survivors. And they may give up some of their future earnings, but for some of these people seeing what's going on and really starting to look at this and the devastation that it causes, that you guys showed in your film, and that it's causing nationwide and worldwide, somebody is going to step up to the plate, and
they'll be a hero. And I almost think what hopefully is going to happen is, if you don't come forward and we find out and other people do, and we find out years from now that you didn't, it's going to be, look, that's a personal decision, but it's going to be like, why didn't you? You had so much power and this happened to you, and you could have done so much good if you came out, and you still didn't, But that's not our decision to make. But
unfortunately,
we're going to get caught by the music here. Why
don't we? Can we have your Twitter handle?
Yeah, it's at an open secret.
Yep.
At an open.
And then we're also on Facebook.
I'm tweeting that all day.
At an open secret, and we're on YouTube. Everything's pretty much linked. So there's a rabbit hole to go down.
That's where we live. Matt, that's where we live. So
thank you so much for coming on and doing this. I mean, this is really
both you and Gabe, and I think you've yet to see the good that you've done. So stay on.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Talk to you later.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.